Welcome back to the Exhaust Note Podcast. I'm Brynn, and this is my grandfather, Ronnie Bryant. He worked on Holman and Moody and built engines for various different vehicles during the 60s. So, can you tell me a bit more about your job there?
I was basically an engine builder. That was the main thing I'd done at Holman and Moody was build engines. We blueprinted all our engines, so there was a lot to do to each one of them. We built the engines, dynoed them, set them in a row, and whoever wanted the engines come in and pick one up. And sometimes we built special ones for certain people, certain race car drivers, but otherwise they just come in and picked one of them up. Some of the race engines they had back then, they had practice engines. The practice engine had been a race engine at the last race, but it come back in the shop. We totally rebuilt them things, and then put them on the dyno, run them on the dyno and everything, and then set them out there for them guys to pick up for practice engines. And sometimes they run better than the race engines. Sometimes they just pretty close. But anyway, that was how we didn't have to have a special engine for practice and for practice or racing. So they kind of used the engine, that's double use on the engine, race engine, practice engine. And then it was a race engine and a practice engine again. So with as many cars as we had to build, engines we had to build for the different cars, that kind of saved Ford Motor Company a little money and saved us some time, I reckon, because we didn't have quite as much to do rebuilding one as we did to build one to start with. And so they always all run on the dyno, just like this brand new. And when they got run on the dyno, they got fogged in. That was for us put oil in them while it was still running, keep it from rusting if it had to set a little bit before it got put in the car. And we taped them up, taped up the intake ports. The carburetor ports, because we took the carburetor off of them. They used their own carburetors. We taped that up, and the exhaust ports, and they was ready to go. So when the next race come, or before the next race come, the guys come and picked up their practice engine, and then usually they come back after that and got their race engine. And so that kept us busy. Back then, we pretty well raced the year round, building engines the year round, except in the winter, totally in the winter. Between seasons, we got a little time in there that we could kind of do some experimenting and kind of get ahead of the race engine business a little bit and get ready for the next year. So we didn't go out totally in a lost with a new year. We had some experimenting that we had to do, and then we had a couple engines sitting there ready for them to take off with. So they wasn't behind the game to start with. That was about it for a year-round job. I enjoyed it. I spent, I don't know, something about 10 years with Holman and Moody, and I was there till Ford Motor Company pulled out of racing. And when they pulled out of racing, of course, some of us had to go, and I was one of them that had to go. So I had a whole freelance after that and built some engines for the guys that kind of filled in at the shop, like Elmo Langley and Bill Champion. I built some engines for them for a while. And that was a fun job too. I enjoyed every time I done it home when I moved it. It was long hours during racing season. You usually went to work at 8 o'clock in the morning, and you went to dinner, then you went to supper, and we'd come back from supper and usually work 10 o'clock Monday through Thursday. And a lot of times we had Friday and Saturday and Sunday off. A lot of times we'd work Sunday also. It depends on how racing was going. If you needed some more work done with some engines for race day, if something had come up, we had some camshaft problems or lifter problems or valve problems or whatever, we had to get in there and find out what the problem was and build new stuff just for that. So it was basically a 7-day-a-week job. We had a lot of guys that come. They all wanted to work at Home and Moody. When they come to work there, they found out all the hours that you had to work, and they didn't last long. They went home. So you figure from 8 in the morning to 10 o'clock at night, Monday through Thursday, that took up all your running around time. You didn't have no girlfriends to go check into and all that. And then Saturday and Sunday, most of the time, a lot of times on Sunday, if things was going good, we'd go in after lunch and then work on to, 8 o'clock or 8 o'clock, usually 5:30, 6 o'clock, and then go home. So Sunday, a lot of times, you got a little time off anyway. You could go do a little playing then. Oh, in the meantime, after building all these race engines, we had drag race engines we had to build also. Different guys. There was Ford back race called drag racers. We built some engines for them guys also. A little story about one of them. He was out of Georgia, and I can't remember his name now to save me. But they was running the 427s, and they was winning a lot of stuff, a lot of single overhead cam stuff, and the Mustangs. And the ones that were just running the straight 427s, it wasn't a single overhead cam. The Chevrolets was beating them right at the lights. So this guy in Georgia decided that he'd do a little homework on his. So blueprinted the engine, full race engine. And he had taken an intake and modified the intake just for him. He had went on the underside of the intake, put some injectors in it so he could give it thing a little shot at nitro. Of course, that weren't legal. That was the name of the game, was cheating. And so I built the engine for him, put it on the dyno, warmed it up, just the valves and everything, pulled the intake off, and we set his intake on there, just the valves and everything again, cranked it up, got it warmed up, and he had all his injectors hooked up and everything, and he was running on nitro. So run it up to see, usually run up about 5,000, see everything's going to work pretty good. Then you could load the engine down and go on. Well, I run it up to about 5 and give it to him, and I said, this is your baby now. Well, of course, he had his injectors, everything set up on running nitro in it. He run it up to, I can't remember the RPM now, maybe 6,000, maybe 7,000, might have even been 8,000. But anyway, when he gave it that shot of nitro, all hell broke loose. It was in the dyno cell. He lifted the heads. And all he did was look over at me and just kind of grin and said, over-engineered, didn't I? Yeah, I believe he did. So that was the end of the nitro part of it. That didn't work too good. So I don't know whether he went back to Georgia and tried something different, but he never did bring it back up to Holmes for us to try it again anyway. But usually the single overhead cam engine and everything that the Mustangs it was running in, it was great. Single overhead cam engine was the first hemispherical engine at that time that Ford was running, and it was mostly all for drag racing. The hemispherical engine was sort of a different breed altogether. Of course, it was a double overhead cam, and it wasn't double overhead. It was a camshaft for the right head, a camshaft for the left head. So they used it single overhead cam, because that was a single cam for each cylinder head. A lot of people say there's a double overhead cam, but it wasn't. It was basically a double overhead cam, but I only had one cam per cylinder head. So with that camshaft and the overhead cam, the way it was set up, the rocker arms was different on it and everything. So instead of having adjustable rocker arms, it had what they called buttons at the time. It was basically a little button that sat on top of the valve stem, and it fit between the valve stem and the rocker arm. And it come in different thicknesses. That was adjusting the valves. When you checked the valve, see what it needed, you put the measurements under there, and then you went and selected the right button to go on the end of the valve stem to take up the clearance between the rocker arm and the valve stem. And you had a box of them, it was all different thicknesses. So it made it kind of simple, but it was kind of aggravating to have to do all that. Because you put one on there, and you check clearance, and you kind of decided what you need, and you put the next one on there, and hopefully you adjusted it right. You'd figured out where you needed 30,000 or where you needed 25,000. So you had to, figure out that. That was a little more work on the overhead cam engines for adjusting the valves. Outside of that, everything else was pretty well the same thing. Now, the overhead cam engine, instead of having a camshaft in it, where the camshaft normally went, because it still used a regular old 427 block. Just changed the heads on them. But where the camshaft went, they had a sprocket, or they had a short, what they call a short shaft. It fit in place of the camshaft. The camshaft goes all the way through the engine. And it had to run on, what, 5 bearings? 4 bearings. I've forgotten it, 4 or 5 bearings. Anyway, must have been 4 bearings. Anyway, with the overhead cam engine, he took the chain from the crankshaft, run it to what would have been the camshaft gear for the regular engine. And of course, it was set up there. It had a gear on it, but it had 2 gears on it with 2 sprockets on it. One to run each camshaft on each cylinder head. So instead of running a long shaft all the way through the engine, they made a little short shaft. And they run on 2 bearings. And but that thing was bad to break. They had to do some engineering to get the right material and everything to stay in that short shaft so it wouldn't break. The engine would run great till that short shaft broke. Then there wasn't nothing to turn the camshaft, the overhead valves. So that was an experimental thing that they had to work out to start with. But after they got that worked out, that was a tough engine. It was built to go. So we had fun doing that. All that was a lot of fun. You know, you got to see the good part, the bad part, and everything working in Holman's. You know, you'd think, oh, I got the best engine ever was, and they go to the racetrack and they wouldn't do squat. So, of course, we had to re-engineer some stuff. One time we had everything built up for Daytona, and they had them all on the trucks and everything, carried all the spare engines down there, the race engines and everything. And they come up with a problem they was having. I can't remember what it was right now. But 2 of us loaded on a plane, took all the equipment and everything, and went back down there and changed, I believe it was something in the valves, and changed all of the heads, all the valves in the cylinder heads that was set up for racing. They was all sitting down there, all taped up, ready to go. And of course, we had to disassemble them and repair that part of it and put them back together. And dyno and then, we had an engine sitting in a pallet, a radiator sitting in front of it, a battery, and cranked it up right there in the race shop. And let it run there and get it warm and adjust the valves on it, set the timing, and they was ready to go racing again. And that was in, let's see, that, I forget where that was, on a Thursday or Friday, late in the day, but we had to load up all the toolboxes and everything. And of course, we had, or Ford Motor Company had given Holman an old World War II DC-3 that was Ford Motor Company's aircraft, which was real plush in the back. It was stuff, you know, for the big dogs. But up front, it was still World War II stuff up front. But we loaded everything up and went down there and done all that. And then on the way back, we had everything completed. And if you've been around a bunch of race car guys, one time when racing was over with, they didn't mind taking a little sip. Anyway, somebody got rambling through the airplane and found where Ford Motor Company had hid their liquor on there. So they got the liquor out and passed it around, and they all had a little snort. So when the plane landed, it was in pretty good shape again. Let's see, one time on that DC-3, was coming back up, and I thought, well, I'm going to walk up into the cockpit up there where the pilot and co-pilot sitting. So I go up there, and of course, the old DC-3 had a fuse panel on the right-hand side and a fuse panel on the right-hand side. Open the door and go in there, and the co-pilot was up there with a flashlight going up and down, and there's all circuit breakers in there. And I stood there a minute, and I said, what are you looking for? He said, we got a circuit out somewhere. I got to find it. I said, will you give me a flashlight and let me help you here? But we found out what it was. We flew on home. But on the way home, it was kind of snowing. Weather was bad. And I swear I believe used the road map to come home because we were right at treetops. And I think that's how they got home. They first followed the road home because it wasn't very high in the air, that's for sure. So as far as flying, I had only worked at Holman Moody maybe, I don't know, less than a month. And Ford Motor Company was paying for all of them to go to Indianapolis to the race. So they let me go. And I really didn't know anybody on the plane. You know, I hadn't been there but just, I don't know, a couple of weeks or two. And so we went up there and enjoyed the race, or what you could enjoy it. That was the year that Eddie Sachs and Dave McDonald got killed in that race. But anyway, on the way up there, it was an old four-motor plane. I think it was an old Constellation, best I remember. But you could see oil just running out over the wing all the time. And that thing would spit every once in a while, oil running out of it. So after we got up there and during the race, and on the way back, they was really got into the lyric on the way back. And I'm thinking they're going to find me dead in this plane with all their drunks. But anyway, on the way back, we got an electrical storm to start with, and that old engine popping and the flame coming out of it and oil running over the wing and everything. I saw, ain't no way we're going to make it back to Charlotte in this thing. But we made it back. And that was an experience in an old airplane. That's a Constellation, best I remember. It had 4 engines on it. So I believe it was Constellation. Let's see, the other things that we run into, Connie Kalitta. He always stopped by. He was one of their drag races with the funny cars, not the funny cars, the rails, the AA fuelers. And he stopped by and we'd put an engine together once in a while for him. I put one together for him, and Connie was kind of he didn't stay, he said a whole lot, but not a whole lot. But anyway, we set that engine up, run it on the dyno, and shut the engine down and went to eat lunch, and we've been running it on Nitro. Okay, when we come back from lunch, I reckon the nitro fumes, it got out in it. And then we go back up a little bit. When Holman moved from the old Army barracks to the new building, when we was over in the old Army barracks and running engines at night, because, you know, we was working up to 10 o'clock, maybe later a lot of times. And people would just complain, all the noise and everything. So when we moved over in the new building, the muffler system they had, we didn't have no mufflers at no Army barracks. They put septic tanks in the ground and run the exhaust system out into the septic tanks, and it had exhaust out to the end. So that muffled it down pretty good. But anyway, back to the Connie Kalitta thing, we've been running that engine on Nitro, and we shut the engine down and went to eat. And when we come back, the nitro fumes, I reckon, it leaked all the way back down into that septic tank. And when we fired that engine up, boom, the lid of the septic tank and all come out of the ground. Septic tank stayed in there, but the lid and all come out. So that was an experience. So they fixed it back up and we ran some more. Some of the drag race guys was, they'd come in there. They didn't stay in long. They was usually in and out. Most of the time, race car drivers are just in and out. Most of them had come in and talk to you, and they was pretty decent. There was one of them that was a real jerk, I thought. But most of them are just nice old country guys that they talk to you just like as anybody, you know. And they tell you some of the stuff they'd done and all in their racing career and everything. But now back then, the name of the game was cheating. Okay. At one time, before they started tearing the engines down and everything, they decided they'd use the P&G checker. And what that was, they'd screw a spark plug out and put a tool in there. And that piston, as it come up, it would pump air out. And basically like push a little ball up in there on a cylinder. And every how far it pushed it up, that was kind of give you how much compression, not how much, but the size of the bore of the thing, you know. Bore was so big at the top and the bottom, and that air filled that up. Okay, a certain amount of air in there, and then when the piston come up, it'd raise that ball up. Okay, that was a P&G, that checker they called it. They didn't use that too long till we figured out how to cheat on that. The exhaust manifold, where it bolted up to the cylinder head, the bottom bolt on the exhaust manifold, you could drill it and it went directly all the way into the combustion chamber. So you take that bolt out when you build the engine. You drill all the way through that hole right there in the combustion chamber, and you had it like a hole. I forget what size hole it was now. But anyway, probably a quarter inch, maybe not, probably eighth. I don't remember what it was now. But it's that piston come up and the air would go out through that hole. So you could, rather than it going all the way out where that bolt was, and of course they'd find that bolt right off. So they put the bolts back in there and drilled a little hole in the boat and the bolt, but they had to experiment with the size of the hole. So it would be only so much air escape from the combustion chamber and push that ball up. So that was a simple thing to do until they caught on about that. But you just screw that bolt out of the bottom bolt, the exhaust manifold, and put your bolt in there with a little hole in it. And they'd spin it over and see how much compression it had or how much volume it had in it to push that ball so high up in the air. So they finally caught on to that after, I don't know, way up in the season, I think. But that was one way of cheating. Another thing, while working there, Permatex. Permatex always been big into racing anyway. Okay, Permatex decided that they wanted us to build an engine with nothing but Permatex stuff in it. So we built the engine. And basically the only thing that we couldn't get to stay with the Permatex stuff that they had at the time was a little gasket that went behind the water pump. And it would always, whatever we put in there, it'd spit it out. Okay, at that time, they didn't have the silicone that they got now. If we had silicone, we could got by with absolutely no gaskets in it. Now, to replace the gaskets where the cylinder head was, around the cylinder head, they cut a little groove around that and took, I'm going to use this as an example, like a piece of copper wire, small wire, a little groove, probably, I don't know, 1/16 of an inch or something, all the way around there. Put that copper wire in there, and the copper wire would stand up, and when you put the cylinder head, it would compress that down. And that was the gasket for the combustion chamber then. And then around where the oil rings, not the oil rings, but where the water transferred from the block to the cylinder head, they grill that out and just put a regular O-ring in that. That would stand, a regular old type O-ring would stand that so the water transferred through there. See, they put that engine together. Funny Flack was working for Permatex at the time. They took the thing to Daytona, and however how many laps that thing run before they had a problem out of it. That was going to be the Permatex, whatever it was. Okay, it ran over 300 miles before they had a problem. So that year they had the Permatex 300 with Funny Flocks driving the car. So that was an experience there. After the race, they brought the engine back. He probably had a dynamite apart with all the Permatex stuff we had in it. But they put it up on the shelf, and it's up on the shelf in Albany Media for a long time. I don't know whatever happened to the engine. But it had been an experience to get a hold of that engine and try to salvage some of it. But with the O-rings around the cylinder head, O-rings around the water transfer ports and all, run pretty good, lived pretty good for a long time. But Fonny Flock was the one that drove the thing. And he was kind of retired at the time, I reckon. But they put him in the car. He was working for Permatex. So they put him in the car and he drove that thing. So that was another experience.
You've mentioned before working at an international place. What was your job there?
Okay. When I went to high school, the whole time in high school, I wanted to join the Naval Air Force. Okay. And at the time, you could join if you was under 17 or 17, under 18. You only had to serve 3 years rather than 4 years. And I thought that sounded pretty good. So anyway, right out of high school, I graduated and I was 17. I went down to join the Navy. And I remember waiting in line. We go through all the physical and everything. And me and the black guy kind of got pulled out together. The black guy, he was from somewhere in South Carolina. I remember that. But they said, ask him whether he had ever had rheumatic fever. And he kind of looked at him and thought a little bit, and he said, yes, the boss said, I had some kind of fever about a month ago, but I don't know if it was rheumatic or not. So anyway, me and him got pulled out. I had a perforated eardrum. So me and him didn't have to go. But anyway, everybody that stayed and had to go on in service lunchtime, everybody got a nice meal except me and him. All we got was a cold sandwich. So I never had to go in service. I was classified as 4F after that. So when I went home, and well, I was kind of disappointed because I want to be in the Navy. I want the Naval Air Force. Well, that killed my career right there. So I had to decide something else I wanted to do. Well, I'd always been a tinker with engines and everything. And I run up on this thing about a school in Nashville, Tennessee, National Auto and Diesel College. So I sit and got some information on that. And so I took what little bit of money I had saved up and sent it in to join the school. And so I went to Nashville Auto and Diesel College. I took the automotive part, the diesel part, and part of it, I went to day and night school, and I took welding. I really didn't think much of the welding to start with. I called home and told Mom, I said, I believe I'll drop out of welding. Well, she was footing the bill, and she said, I don't believe you will, because you done signed up for that, you're going to stay. So I thought, well, Mom said I need to stay, I'm going to stay. So I stayed. Welding got me out of a lot of stuff down after that. So after I got out of Nashville, I come home, and I got a job at International Truck and on Graham Street. And so I worked there. I got to build the engines, big old diesel engines down there, behind them truck engines. And they got a fuel injection system, test bench, back rack test bench. So they got it. They didn't have nobody to run the thing. Well, we had worked with those things in Nashville at school. So I told them I knew a little something about them. So they put me back there in a little old closet thing with that back rack injecting machine. And when you set a injector pump up on that thing and adjust it, and it's spinning it, it sounded like hell in that little old room. And I really wasn't fond of being hemmed up in that little room. So I didn't do that too awful long. I got back out on the floor and built some engines. Cummins engines. The camshaft on those Cummins engines, to adjust the cam timing on those things, you adjusted the rocker arm. The rocker arms come in. Of course, there's 6-cylinder engines. They come in sets of 2, 2, and 4, or 2, 2, and 4, 2, 2, and 2. They give you 6 of them. So to adjust those things, you had to put gaskets behind them and move them in and out to get the right cam timing and injector timing. Well, the first ones, they didn't know how to use the dial indicators and all to set the cam timing up on them things. Well, we had done some of that at school, so I knew how to do it. So I got to build them engines in. At the school, I taught me a lot. Matter of fact, when I went to work at Holman and Moody, they got some Detroit diesel air pumps in and the blowers. So one of the old guys, he'd been an old guy he was kind of the granddaddy, I reckon, because he would have cam grinder and everything. They thought he knew everything. But anyway, he had one of them GMC blowers back there, and he was working right on the other side of the wall where I was putting the engine together. And I could hear the office cussing going on over there and everything. So I walked around to see what was going on, and he was trying to tear one of them blowers down. And he went on cussing and said, we done broke every damn puller we got in the shop here, and I can't get these gears apart on this thing. So I stood there a little bit, and I said, you want me to show you how to take that apart? Oh, Lord, he lit up on me. You smart-ass kid. Just take that thing and tear it apart for me. So I take it up there, and I got 2 pullers, pulled them gears all together. They had to come off together. That's the only way they would come off and go back on. They had to be together because the gears were spiraled one way and the rotor spiraled the other way. So as you turned one, it locked it up. So you had to pull them off together. So I got to build a lot of blowers after that. And let's see, they decided to put some turbos on some marine engines. So they built a marine engine, put the turbos on that thing, and put it on the dyno and all, got some horsepower. They was proud of that thing. They shut it down, went to lunch and come back, and it wouldn't run. And they couldn't figure out how come it wouldn't run. Well, a turbo can spin up 90 to 100,000 RPMs. So when you shut it down, if it's under full load and everything, especially when they first put them things on over the road trucks, the trucker would pull a long hill with that thing, and that turbo would just be wound tight, 90 to 100 RPM. He got to the top of the hill, he was tired, so he just shut the thing down to rest a minute. And when he got ready to go, it wouldn't go. So that turbo with the RPMs it was spinning. When you shut it down, it didn't have no oil from the crankcase. When we shut the engine down, the same pump, it was feeding oil to the crankshaft and all on the engine was feeding oil to that turbo. So we shut the engine down, there wasn't no oil there, and that turbo was still going, and it just cooked the shaft on those things. So when they put them two turbos on a marine engine and run it on a dyno, the same thing happened to it. They run it on the dyno, and of course it was running 7,000 RPM, I imagine. It might not have been that much on a marine engine. But anyway, running it under full load, shut it down, and I went to eat, come back, it wouldn't do nothing. It'd spit and go on, that was it. And I said, y'all probably cooked the turbos on that thing. And that's what they did. They didn't know that you had to keep oil in things all the time. To solve the problem on the truck engines, they come out with a can that fit on top of the turbo. The oil filled that can up. And then when you shut the engine down, it still had oil in that can. And there was gravity feeding that oil to the turbo and kept it oiled until it wound down. So that saved the turbos back in that day.
Wow, well, thanks for sharing. There's some very interesting stories.
Yeah. So it was, there's a lot of stuff that I had learned at school that helped me when I went to work at home. And of course, I was a young kid there. I wasn't, I don't know, maybe 20 years old. And they didn't think the young kid knew anything. But I didn't really know anything then. I had to learn just like everybody else there. But a lot of stuff had already been taught at the diesel school. It helped me out along the way.
Well, thanks for talking. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Yeah. Well, this has been the Exhaust Note Podcast. I'm Brynn Patton, and that's Ronnie Bryant. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.